There is a unique power in velvet justice, a force that arrives with a soft touch but carries a weight that cannot be moved. Witness the smooth, strategic moves of a hero who fights for the light with elegance and power. Subscribe today and see the beauty of a calculated victory. Smell hit me before I even got through the front door. Not the welcome home kind of smell. Not my wife's cooking. Not the pine cleaner she always used on the hardwood floors. This was something else. Something wrong. My brain cataloged it before my conscious mind caught up. Iron, rot, infection. The same smell that clung to field hospitals and places I wasn't supposed to have been. I'd been on a classified rotation for 11 weeks. No calls home after week 3. Standard protocol. The kind of assignment where you hand your phone to a sergeant and don't see it again until you're stateside. My commanding officer had offered me a 2-day debrief in Virginia before I flew back to Portland. I said no. I just wanted to get home. I set my duffel bag down in the hallway. The house was quiet in a way that felt wrong, not peaceful, but held. Like the air itself was waiting for something. Mia? My wife appeared at the top of the stairs fast. Too fast. Like she'd been listening for the door. She was wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She came down 3 steps and stopped. "You're early," she said. "Flight got bumped up." I looked past her. "Where's Owen?" "He's resting. He had a fever a couple days ago. He's fine." Something in my chest pulled tight. Owen was 7. He'd had fevers before. Every kid does. But the way she said fine was off. Compressed. Like she was fitting a bigger thing into a smaller word. "I want to see him." "He's sleeping, Adrian. Let him rest." She came down the rest of the stairs and stepped in front of me. Actually, stepped in front of me. Mia, who had been married to a Delta Force operator for 6 years and had never once tried to physically stop me from going anywhere in my own house. I looked at her for a long moment. Her hands were clasped in front of her stomach. Her knuckles were pale. "Move," I said quietly. She did. I went upstairs. Owen's door was half open. The smell was stronger here. That iron rot combination that I now understood completely. I'd smelled it in Kandahar. I'd smelled it in a basement in a city I can't name in a country I was never officially in. I pushed the door open. My son was in his bed under a thin sheet, and even in the dim light, I could see his skin had a yellow-gray cast to it. His lips were dry. His breathing was shallow and too fast. He was sweating through his pajama top. I lifted the sheet. The bandage was on his lower left side, lumbar region, just above the hip. Whoever had placed it knew where they were going. The gauze had bled through and dried brown at the edges. When I carefully peeled back one corner, the incision beneath was swollen, hot, and the surrounding tissue had begun to pucker in a way that told me the infection had been there for more than 48 hours. My hands were steady. They're always steady. There's Daddy. That's the training, but something behind my sternum went completely cold. I went back downstairs. Mia was in the kitchen, standing at the sink, not washing anything. Just standing. "Tell me," I said. "It was an accident." He fell off his bike near the creek and... "Mia." I said her name like a door closing. "His incision is sutured. That isn't a fall." She turned around and for a second I saw it. The thing behind her eyes. Not guilt exactly. Terror. But not of me. Of something else. "I need you to tell me what happened to our son." She started crying. Not the kind of crying that asks for comfort. The kind that's been held in too long and finally breaks the container. It took 20 minutes to get the full story out of her. She had gambling debts. Not small ones. 2 years of online poker and sports betting. She'd hidden it from me the entire time I'd been in and out on rotations. By the time she understood the scale of what she owed, it was $74,000, most of it to a private lender connected to a man named Harlan Voss. She described him as a healthcare entrepreneur. The way she said it made my jaw tighten. Voss had a solution. He knew a surgeon, a man named Dr. Tyne. Voss had a solution. He knew a surgeon, a man named Dr. Tyne Clifton Price, who ran a private practice on the east side of the city and maintained a separate set of arrangements for clients who needed organ procurement outside of standard channels. Price had a recipient waiting, a wealthy man in declining health who had been on the transplant wait list for 2 years and had grown tired of waiting. He needed a left kidney. A child-sized kidney wasn't ideal, but Price had assured the recipient it would adapt. The price was $90,000. Mia's debt would be cleared. She would keep $16,000 in cash. Our son's kidney, the left one, the healthy one, had been removed in Price's private surgical suite 4 days ago while I was sleeping in a bunk in a facility I can't disclose. She hadn't told me because she was afraid. She had planned to let Owen recover and never say a word. I stood in that kitchen for what felt like a long time. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't say anything threatening. I just stood there and let her all settle into me like sediment finding the bottom of a river. Then I took out my phone and called the one person I needed. His name is Garrett Lowe. We served together for 4 years, 2 of them in the same 12-man unit. He left the Army to become an ER physician. He lives 40 minutes north of Portland. When I told him what I was looking at, he said he'd be there in 35. He arrived in 30. He examined Owen for 12 minutes without saying anything to me. When he came out of the room, his face was controlled in the way that medical professionals learn to keep it controlled. But I know Garrett, and I saw what he was working to conceal. He's septic, Garrett said. Early stage, but moving fast. The incision site is infected and his liver enzymes are going to be off. That yellow tint is early jaundice from the systemic stress. He paused. He needs a hospital. Price runs a network, Mia said from the hallway. She'd followed us up. He has contacts at Cascadia Medical and at St. Midier, Vincent's. He told me if Owen ever showed symptoms and I brought him in, he would know. He said, she stopped. He said what? I said. He said Owen was evidence. That if Owen ended up in an ER, things would go badly for all of us. I looked at Garrett. How long do we have? I asked him. If we treat him aggressively right now, IV antibiotics, fluids, fever management, I can buy us time. Maybe 12 hours before it becomes critical. He met my eyes. Adrian, whatever you're thinking, 12 hours is not a lot of time. I know, I said. It's enough. I went to my study and opened the floor's safe behind the bookcase. I keep a secondary set of documents in there, not anything illegal, just the kind of paperwork that a man in my profession accumulates. Contact numbers, background files on people connected to clients. I've done security consulting for over the years. I'd left the Army 14 months ago on a medical separation. My left shoulder, 3 surgeries, still not right. And I've been building a private security consulting firm since then. One of my early clients had been a regional health systems board member. In the course of that work, I'd done a thorough background investigation on every major medical provider in the Portland metro area. I pulled the file on Clifton Price. He wasn't just a surgeon. He was the kind of man who moves through institutions like water through cracks, always present, never quite accountable. Board member at 2 nonprofits, donor to 3 city council campaigns. His private practice, Cascadia Precision Medicine, LLC, was registered in Delaware. He drove a $180,000 car. He owned a lake house in Bend. I also found the connection I was looking for. Harlan Voss, the man who had come to my wife with the offer, was a silent partner in a real estate holding company whose primary asset was the building where Price's surgical suite was located. Voss had a separate investment vehicle, a medical services LLC, that received consulting fees from Price's practice. On paper, it was laundering, not elegantly. More importantly, Price's surgical suite was not affiliated with any hospital system. It was a standalone outpatient facility licensed by the state for elective procedures. Elective procedures only. Performing a non-consented surgery on a minor in that facility was not just criminal. It meant the facility license itself was the instrument of the crime, which meant the facility could be seized. I'm not a lawyer, but I have a lawyer. Her name is Pamela Cho. She's 48 years old. She spent 12 years as a federal prosecutor and she is the most frighteningly capable person I have ever met who doesn't carry a weapon. I'd done security work for her firm the previous year. I called her at 11:42 p.m. She answered on the second ring. I told her what I had. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Send me the financial documents. Don't touch the surgeon yet. Don't contact Price or Voss. Where is your son right now?" "Home. A physician is with him. Keep him there. Give me 2 hours." I went back upstairs. Garrett had set up a rudimentary IV line. He kept a field kit in his car from old habit. And Owen's temperature was coming down by tenths of a degree. My son was half awake. He looked at me when I came in. "Dad," he said. His voice was small. "I'm sorry I wasn't awake when you got home." I sat on the edge of his bed and put my hand over his. "Don't be sorry," I said. "I'm here now. Everything's going to be okay." I meant it, but I want to be precise about what I meant. I wasn't saying it to comfort him. I was telling him a fact. I had decided it was going to be okay, and in my experience, the things I decide tend to become true. Pamela called back at 1:17 a.m. She had spent 2 hours on the phone with a contact at the Oregon Department of Justice and with a federal prosecutor she worked with during her time at the U.S. Attorney's Office. The financial trail I'd sent her, the Voss Price connection, the Delaware LLC, the facility licensing, was enough to open a federal investigation under the National Organ Transplant Act. She had also called a judge she knew. "Here's what I need from you," she said. "I need your son examined by a hospital physician on record before 6 a.m. I need that examination to document the surgical site, the infection, and the missing kidney. That becomes the evidentiary foundation. Without it, everything else is financial crime and conspiracy. Serious, but not the thing that puts Price in a cage. You said Price has contacts at Cascadia and St. Vincent's. He does. That's why I'm not sending Owen there." She gave me an address. "A colleague of mine has hospital privileges at Providence, Portland. He's expecting you. Private entrance. No intake through the main desk." I looked at Garrett. He nodded. We moved Owen at 2 a.m. He was awake enough to walk with support. In the car, he asked if he was going to the doctor. I told him yes. He asked if it was going to hurt. I told him the worst part was already over. The physician at Providence, a man I'll call Dr. R, because he asked me not to name him publicly, completed the examination and filed the documentation Pamela needed. He also upgraded Owen's antibiotic protocol significantly. Within 4 hours, Owen's fever had dropped to 100.2, and his color was better. I left Garrett with Owen and drove back across the city. At 5:30 a.m., I was parked outside Clifton Price's lake house in Bend. He'd driven there the previous evening. I'd tracked his car through a contact I won't elaborate on. He was alone. His wife and their 2 children were at the family home in Lake Oswego. I want to be very clear about what happened next, because there's a version of this story that turns me into something I'm not. I did not go there to hurt him. I went there to make sure he understood what was already in motion, and to give him one specific opportunity. I knocked on the front door. He answered in a robe, coffee in hand, and when he saw me, he tried to close the door. I put my foot in the gap, not violently, just firmly. "My name is Adrian Colt," I said. "You operated on my son 4 days ago without my consent. His name is Owen. He's 7 years old." Price's face went through several things in quick succession. "I don't know what you're." "My attorney filed an emergency disclosure with the Oregon DOJ at 4 a.m. this morning," I said. "There is a federal investigation under the National Organ Transplant Act that will be formally opened in approximately 90 minutes. Your LLC in Delaware, your arrangement with Harlan Voss, and the facility license for Cascadia Precision Medicine are all part of the evidentiary package." I paused. "I'm telling you this, not as a threat. I'm telling you because there's one thing I want that the federal investigation cannot give me, and I want you to volunteer it before they take you into custody and you lose your ability to negotiate anything." His face had gone the color of old paper. "The recipient," I said. "The man who received my son's kidney. I want his name. his physician of record, his current medical status. I held his eyes. My son will survive. He's young and he's strong, and his remaining kidney will compensate. But I want to know who has what was taken from him. For the record, for Owen's medical file, because he will need that information for the rest of his life. Price told me. I won't share the recipient's name here. What I will say is that he was not a man who knew what had been done to obtain the organ. He believed he had received a kidney through an expedited private donor arrangement. He was 71 years old, a retired shipping executive, and when federal investigators contacted him 2 days later, he cooperated fully and was ultimately not charged. I called Pamela from Price's driveway. He's going to run, I told her. No, he isn't, she said. Check the end of the driveway. 2 Deschutes County Sheriff's vehicles were pulling in as I walked out. Harlan Voss was arrested at his home in Lake Oswego at 6:20 a.m. Price was taken into custody at the lake house at 6:34. The facility license for Cascadia Precision Medicine was suspended by the Oregon Health Authority by noon that day, and the building was seized as part of the federal investigation. The thing about Mia. This is the part of the story that I don't tell simply, because it isn't simple. She was my wife. She is Owen's mother. What she did, the decisions she made, the things she allowed to happen to our son for money, is not something I have found a framework for that makes it smaller than it is. I have tried. I don't have one. She was charged. Conspiracy to commit criminal sale of human organs. Reckless endangerment of a minor. She cooperated with prosecutors. Fully. Everything. The entire financial history with Voss. Every communication with Price. Her cooperation was significant. Her attorney negotiated a plea that resulted in an 8-year sentence with possibility of parole at 5. Some people, when I've told this story, say that's not enough. I don't disagree. Owen and I moved to Beaverton after the trial. My sister lives there. Her name is Joanna, and she has 2 kids close to Owen's age, and she came over with dinner 3 times a week for the first 2 months without being asked. I don't know how to explain what that kind of quiet, reliable presence does for a person who has been in the particular darkness we were in. But it mattered more than almost anything else. Owen went back to school in January. He sees a therapist every Thursday. He plays on a soccer team on Saturday mornings, and he is, somehow, still the kid who laughs loudest at his own jokes and draws elaborate maps of fictional countries in his spare time. Children have a capacity for forward motion that I have stopped trying to explain and started trying to learn from. His remaining kidney is healthy. His nephrologist checks his function every 6 months. The numbers are good. The human body is more resilient than most people understand, and my son is proof of that. There is something I want to say to anyone who asks me what I would have done if Pamela hadn't answered the phone, if Garrett hadn't been 40 minutes away, if the contact at Providence hadn't been available. I know what you're asking. You're asking if I would have gone to Price differently, without the documentation, without the attorney. Just me, in the dark, with 11 weeks of accumulated skills and a very clear understanding of human anatomy. I'll say this, I'm grateful I didn't have to find out, because the version of me that comes home to his son's infected incision and his wife's admission and a surgeon sleeping in his lake house, that version of me was not thinking about legal process. That version of me was thinking about the fact that my son is 7 years old and someone decided he was a transaction. The law gave me the outcome I needed. Price is serving 14 years. Voss took a plea for 7. The recipient's transplant team is managing the organ's adaptation, and my son's medical records are part of that file. The law gave me what I needed. But I want to be honest. I gave the law about 6 hours before I was going to handle it a different way. 6 hours. That's how long I trusted the process. After that, it was going to be something else entirely. Owen asked me once, about 8 months after everything, if I was angry at his mom. We were in the backyard. He was kicking a soccer ball against the fence, not really looking at me. I thought about how to answer. I thought about all the things that were true. The magnitude of what she had done. The years of lies underneath it. The specific horror of knowing that someone who was supposed to protect him had calculated his worth in dollars. Yeah, I said. I am. He kicked the ball. It bounced back to him. Me too, he said. Then he kicked it again, and I stood there in the backyard of our rented house in Beaverton, watching my son play soccer by himself in the late afternoon, and I thought, this is what I was deployed to protect. Not a concept, not a value. This exact kid in this exact backyard kicking this exact ball. Everything else. The ops. The clearances. The years of learning how to be dangerous on behalf of people who'd never know my name. All of it was just preparation for the 11 weeks I was gone when I should have been home. I won't make that mistake again. Owen turns 8 next month. He wants a telescope and a pizza party with exactly 4 friends. He's already written the guest list. He showed it to me with the gravity of someone filing an important legal document. I told him it looked perfect. He said he wanted me to be in charge at the pizza because last time Aunt Joanna burned the edges. She did burn the edges. It's a fair critique. I told him I'd handle the pizza, and I will. People ask me what the hardest part was. They expect me to say it was finding the incision, or the 11 hours between discovering what happened to Owen and watching Price get put in a sheriff's vehicle in his bathrobe at the end of his own driveway. It wasn't either of those things. The hardest part was standing in my kitchen at midnight, looking at my wife, and understanding that the person who had done this wasn't a stranger. There was no breaking and entering, no outside threat I could neutralize. The harm had come from inside the house, from someone who had kissed my son goodnight and then made a phone call that treated him like an asset to be liquidated. That's the thing nobody prepares you for. We train for external threats. We build perimeters, run contingencies, identify vulnerabilities in the environment around us. Nobody trains you for the moment you realize the perimeter was already breached. Not by someone who forced their way in, but by someone you handed a key. I've thought a lot about what made the difference between that night going one way and going another. And I keep coming back to the same answer. The decisions I made in the first 6 hours were emotional decisions. They felt like they should have been. Every cell in my body was screaming to drive to Bend and knock down a door. But I had Garrett upstairs keeping my son alive. I had Pamela's number in my phone. I had 11 weeks of accumulated discipline that had trained me to assess before I act. That discipline wasn't something I was born with. It was built, choice by choice, over years of being in situations where the wrong reaction at the wrong moment cost lives. Real ones. People I knew. What I want to say, and I'm saying this as someone who almost didn't trust the process, is that intelligence is not the same thing as knowing a lot of things. Real intelligence is knowing which tool to use and when. I had every capability to walk into that lake house and make Clifton Price experience something he would never recover from. But I also had the clarity to understand that what Owen needed wasn't my rage. He needed a federal investigation, a documented medical record, and a prosecutor who had spent 12 years learning exactly how to put men like Price away for a long time. Choosing the harder, slower, more precise option when every instinct is screaming at you to act. That's not weakness. That is the thing. That is the whole thing. And Mia, I won't pretend I've resolved it. 8 years is what the plea got her. Owen knows she's in prison. He knows why, in the age-appropriate version we gave him with his therapist present. He's 7, now 8. And he holds it the way kids hold things that are too big for them, carefully, at a slight distance, checking it occasionally to see if it's gotten any lighter. Some things don't get lighter. They just become part of what you carry. What I know is this. Every choice has a direction. Mia's choices moved in one direction for 2 years. Away from her family, toward a debt she was too ashamed to name, toward a man like Voss who offered her a solution that required her to stop thinking of her son as a person. Price's choices moved in the same direction, toward money, toward insulation from consequence, toward the belief that his credentials made him untouchable. And then there's Owen in the backyard, kicking a soccer ball against the fence on a Tuesday afternoon, still drawing maps of countries that don't exist. Still laughing loudest at his own jokes. He didn't choose any of it, but he's still moving forward. I think about that more than anything else. Because if he can do it, A kid who had something taken from him before he was old enough to understand what? Then the least I can do is make sure the rest of his life is built on something solid. I'm working on that every day. It's the most important mission I've ever had.